Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you for answering. My name is Stuart Schlossman. For those that don't know, some people only know me as Stu's Views and MS News. Imagine that. They don't know that I'm president and founder of MS Views and News, this organization, and how this came about many years ago after I was diagnosed, and there just wasn't enough information to be had from the healthcare community, and I had to go out and do what I have to do these days, and that is search the information on the internet. And then when I was searching the information for myself, I started providing it to others. And as I began with just a small support group of less than 20 people, the information is now reaching people in greater than 90 countries, and over 35,000 people now receive this from us every month. Thank you. So, that's how this all began. MS Views and News, though, these days is known for what we do. We're providing education, information, and resources. And talking about the resources, recently we added an employee, our first one, to our organization, first full-timer, and she is a social worker. And for those that get email from me, saw that we sent out an e-blast recently that said that we're giving out this free community service for our MS Social Work Navigator. All right? And that's not just for the MS patient, but this is also for the caregivers. Again, it is a free community service. There is a toll-free number that is found on our website and that you've received now by email, and you will also always see in the newsletter that you get every other week. Okay? Again, a free community resource for you, the MS patient, or for your caregiver, whether it be a direct caregiver, any family member. If they have the need to talk with somebody about a resource that is needed, let them call Jennifer. And one of these days you all will get to meet her. But if you don't get to meet her in person, you can find her on our YouTube channel, which is something else that we provide. And on our YouTube channel, last year we had over 16,000 different people see the videos that we're providing. There's now over 150 different videos on there about everything that you want to know about multiple sclerosis. In addition to that, and I didn't get a chance to print it today because I ran out of ink in my printer, okay? And that is, see, I forget, I have MS and I forget about this. But we have a communication tool now. And we also sent out an e-blast about this recently too. It is a device, it's a piece of paper. It's two-sided. You could go to our website and find it as well. And on here is a checklist of everything that could possibly be wrong with you with MS. Not about everything that's wrong with you, but about MS. All right? And all you do is you print it off and you take this to your neurology appointment, all right? And you check off all the different things that are bothering you. So this way, when you get to your appointment, you're not like, I don't remember why I'm here. All right? Or you go through your half-hour appointment with your doctor, and as you're leaving, you say, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask you about this. No, because you're going to have it written down, and it's going to be right in front of you already, all right? And not only that, it'll be great for your clinician because the time that you're there just gets to be managed very well. So we want you to be able to use that, and again, you'll get that from our website. Again, we spoke about the YouTube channel, the website, the social worker, the video recordings, you see. I mean, for those that have never been in this room before, we video record our programs. And we're video recording these programs so that for a few things. One, if you forget what happened here tonight, or you just really weren't listening, you get to go home and you get to hear this in about a week from now. You could play back the video and hear what happened that night. Or if you were listening to the program and you just want to go over it again, or you want to show a family member or somebody else that, maybe a coworker, of what's going on with you with this specific subject, you'll be able to tell them to go to the YouTube channel, give them the URL, and just let them watch the program. The benefit of watching it is you get to pause, fast forward, rewind, go to the bathroom, rewind again, go forward again, okay? Do whatever you want. Feed the dogs, come back to it again. These are all a great thing. All right, enough of all of that, all right? So, for tonight's program, like we have to recognize at every one of our programs, we recognize the company that gave us the funding to do the program. These companies actually want people to learn. They want the MS patients to learn from, like, our programs, the comprehensive programs, an A to Z about most of the MS medications that are out there, all right? And we're going to talk about the current MS treatments that are out here. And for tonight's program, we want to thank, and I would like you all to thank them as well, and that is Teva Neuroscience. Okay, so I hope that everybody can say thank you. Right, that's what we need to hear. All that screaming, all that chanting, it's a good thing. All right, tonight's format, like I started to speak about before, we're going to have Dr. Gold speak first. Okay, and Dr. Gold, yeah, go ahead, clap for him too. Boy, we don't even have to include a clap on that one. Now it's done realistically. All right, so Dr. Gold's going to speak with you about the current treatment options that are out here. He'll also throw in a little bit about gait issues. For anybody that doesn't know about gait, it's not the gate that you close on your fence, and it's not about what's at the horse track, but it's about the way some of you are walking. So he's going to speak about this too, a little bit about MS relapse, maybe something about nutrition, and some of the primary symptoms. Yeah? All that in 30 minutes? Nah. Okay. He'll talk a little bit longer. After Dr. Gold speaks, we're going to do a Q&A for 30 minutes, okay? In your car, somewhere on your table or in the packets that you have somewhere, you're going to find maybe something to write on. So if you have any questions while he's talking, please wait for him to finish. And then we're going to go around. I'm going to run around the room. Maybe Michelle from outside will run around with microphones. Please know this, everybody. These cameras are not going to you, all right? We are not going to be turning the cameras around. They will not see you. If you do not want your voice recognized, you're in a great area of Central Florida, and you could act like Mickey Mouse or something else, okay? Just change your voice if you don't want anybody to recognize your voice. All right, after Dr. Gold speaks, again, I said Dr. Justin Koenitzer is here, and he'll be speaking about all to do with the impact of MS on the family. After he speaks, we'll do another round of Q&A, all right? And after they're both done, then we get to go after our raffle item, okay? That makes you stay here for the night, and you get to listen to everybody. So without any further ado, let's get this program started, if we haven't already. And next up, we have Dr. Justin Koenitzer, who again will speak to you about the impact of MS on the family. Please hold your questions until the end, and we will do the same thing again.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stuart. I hope that's loud enough there. Okay. Why don't we do this? Because we're about halfway through the program, I want to do something a little bit different. Let me ask you to participate a little bit. And let me start out by asking, how many people in the room have been to an MS News and Views event before? If by show of hands here. Okay. Great, more than half. How many folks have been to an event that Dr. Gold has spoken at before? Oh, wait a minute, more hands came up. Okay, so you've seen him at non-MS News and Views events. Okay, wonderful. So almost everyone here has heard him speak. Let's just give a real quick round of applause, because that was excellent. And you obviously have some return customers. And real quick, to wake us up halfway through, what about one more round of applause for Stuart and our pharmaceutical hosts? So I'm Dr. Justin Koenitzer, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the impacts of MS on the family. I'm a clinical psychologist in Orlando. And how many people have heard me speak at one of these events before? Show of hands. Oh, excellent. Oh, just one person. Oh, this is good. Well, no, I like that. Okay, good. So this won't be redundant. That's great. So here you are, maybe, perhaps. We know, you all know that MS has impacts on multiple areas of your life, not just your own individual functioning, right? And let's explore these areas tonight in a little bit more depth. And I'm going to focus in particular, like I said a couple times already, on the family life. Stuart mentioned we can talk about intimacy. But just like Dr. Gold, I want to keep this open, all right? Because I don't have a particular agenda either, other than to meet your needs tonight. So again, as Dr. Gold mentioned, if we can keep questions till the end, but do jot them down as we go through so that I can speak to what your needs are. All right, so I wanted to start out by talking about the effects on the individual. But I think that Dr. Gold did a nice enough job of covering the symptoms of MS, and he spoke a little bit about behavioral aspects and non-traditional therapies. So I'm going to keep this, pretty light. Okay? I'll mention a couple of bullet point things just from the neuropsychological research, if you weren't aware. And you all can read from back there, hopefully, so I'm going to kind of breeze through this. I want to focus here, though. If you look, 30 to 50% of folks with MS will develop mild memory or cognitive impairments, at minimum mild memory or cognitive impairments. 20 to 30% will go on to develop more significant cognitive impairments. Okay? But the cool thing is that 20 to 50% will not develop cognitive impairments at all, or at least not clinically to where we notice them in our day-to-day life. All right? And that's something interesting because in a lot of these talks and a lot of your own private moments, we're focused on MS as a disease and impairment. All right? And I want to offer you a shift in perspective a little bit. We'll be realistic, but let's focus a little bit on what we can do and what in our life is not necessarily impaired. Okay, Dr. Gold covered this pretty well, so I'm gonna skip right through the motor impairments and other cognitive impairments. Emotional impacts of MS on the family in a minute. But first, close your eyes for 1 second if you're comfortable doing that. Okay? All right, now open your eyes. Imagine back when you were a wee little kid, if you can. Most of us don't have memories that start before age about 2.5 or 3, but go back to maybe age 5, 7, as far back as you can go, and put yourself in this scene. At night, before sleep, this little guy looks like maybe, 5, 6. What was your life like in bed when the lights went out and maybe you had a night light, maybe you didn't? Is anyone here afraid of the dark when you were little? Not a single one person was afraid of the dark, that's it? Maybe you're having a memory lapse in the moment. I think, or you don't want to admit it, I think at one point or another, we were all afraid of the dark. If you can't, think about kids or grandkids, okay? You know the experience of being afraid of the dark. What would you think, because 99% of you weren't afraid of the dark, what would you think your kids or grandkids are afraid of? And you can just shout out for this. We don't need the microphone. I heard the boogeyman. What else? Oh, you guys are too good, right? We jumped ahead. The unknown. Why is the unknown so scary? There's not a book on it. That's a perfect answer. It's the same thing you're afraid of now. What do you mean? Are you sure you haven't heard me speak before? Yeah. It's unpredictable, right? We are more comfortable with things that we can predict than things that we can't predict. And I don't know that you need Dr. Gold's or my talk to know this. If you're living with MS or a loved one of someone with MS, that a lot of this condition is unpredictable. Where am I going to be tomorrow, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, right? And so it's incredibly scary. The emotional impacts of MS on the individual, and we'll talk about they're similar, they parallel in the family, are anxiety. There's so much uncertainty and unpredictability in MS that comes with a lot of anxiety, right? There are direct physiological consequences of MS in the emotional category, like anxiety and depression. But forget about that for a minute and just imagine, the psychological impacts of anxiety, not knowing where you're going to be or what your next symptom or when your next relapse will emerge and how bad it will be. About 25% of individuals, this is a rough estimate, by the way. I've seen literature to suggest up to 50% of folks with MS at one point will develop a depressive condition. And as I just mentioned, there are two main types of depression in a lot of neurological conditions. The direct physiological impact of the condition can produce a depression due to brain chemistry or certain brain structures that might be affected. But the indirect or reactive type of depression is that which you are developing because of the impacts of the condition on your life, how it changes your life and how that makes you feel, and that's important. Another consideration for emotional impacts on the individual is this thing down here, euphoria. If you've heard of the condition bipolar disorder, some folks with MS can develop a euphoric feeling. It can be transient. It can come in waves or episodes. It's interesting. We think of mood conditions primarily as depression or anxiety, and people would think, oh, I'd love to feel euphoric and kind of super happy for a long time. But this type of euphoria that can sweep through can be a bit uncomfortable. Okay, it's almost such an extreme emotional high that you feel like you want to get out of your skin. Okay, and that's not pleasant. And that can happen and is seen in MS. This last point down here that I just brought up, often overlooked, is the sense of loss. I told you we'd be positive, and now it's all silent because we're talking about emotional conditions and loss. But the emotions that accompany loss, when you lose your dog, when you lose a loved one, are pretty powerful. I have down here the common 5: grief, denial, anger, fear, okay, a sense of loss. And this can accompany really any condition, but we don't talk about it enough. Your loss of your sense of self, what maybe you used to be or what you think you might become, and the loss in that. So aside from what you might already know that's common, the depression and anxiety, the point here is there are plenty of other emotions and emotional situations that you might encounter that I don't think we talk about enough, and maybe we can focus on a little bit here tonight. I mentioned self-image already, and I want to present this as, you might be vulnerable to a changed view of who you are and who you will be in your world. But we can also look at this as an opportunity. An opportunity to redefine yourself in positive ways. Think about that for a minute. I know many of you have probably already done that, but if you haven't, think about it. And Stuart's out of the room, but I think you can speak to him about that too, right? I think Stuart's done a good deal of that, and that's a nice thing. How you see yourself can be related to how you think others see you. This is a common... It spans the line of psychological and social psychological research. How we think others see us can change the way we begin to see ourselves. And MS is at times not an outwardly noticeable condition, but we all know at times it can very much be an outwardly noticeable condition. Changes in your gait, in your global physical functioning. We talked about posture a little bit tonight. Changes in how you interact with folks if you do start to develop memory slips. Dysarthria or problems with your speech or slowness with your speech. And so if you begin to think, well, I don't want to go to that thing that we usually go to. I don't want to go to church, or I don't want to go to that social event because I think I know what others are thinking of me, and I don't like that. That can play back in on your self-image. And any other change that comes from a different area, indirect or direct, as a consequence of your MS, can impact your self-image. All right, and I think that's pretty obvious. So that was a breeze through the effects on the individual, which is a segue into the effects on the family. Families are systems. And as it says here, chronic illnesses are not diseases of the individual, but rather diseases within a family. You are not isolated. How many folks in this room came here with some type of support, whether it's family or a friend or someone else? Almost everyone, okay? These gears, This is the best image I can come up with to remind you that as one gear turns, what happens to all the other gears? Okay, let's make this simple so you can walk out and remember some basic images to bring you back to this conversation. They turn too. As you change relative to your wife, your husband, your kids, your coworkers, your friends, they will necessarily have to move, shift, and change too. And that's a huge, huge point to remember. All right, pre-existing and underlying difficulties, and we should say, not necessarily pre-existing, but other difficulties you might develop later. There's been a lot of questions tonight already about comorbid diseases and conditions where what happens if I have one thing and another thing at the same time? How will the medication for my MS impact the other condition or vice versa? We are all complex beings, not just individuals with MS and that's it, right? So what we bring to the table before our diagnosis of MS and our expression of symptoms, and what happens to us after all impacts who we are and who we are within our family. One of the biggest points to discuss here about the impact on the family is role shifts. And how many know what I'm talking about already? All right, when you can no longer do something or do something as well as you used to, what has to happen for those gears to turn as smoothly as they once did within your family? The burden shifts. Someone else might have to pick up the slack. You used to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe it takes you double the time, or maybe you simply can't do X, Y, and Z anymore. Someone else has to pick up the slack. What are some consequences that can happen when someone else has to pick up the slack? Guilt, back to those emotions of loss, right? That plays into it. You know, I'm sorry? Anger on both parties. Anger within yourself. I'm assuming if you are the person with MS, you might be angry that you can't do what you used to. And your loved ones, you might fear that they're angry and they might actually become angry at these role shifts, right? So you don't go it alone, for sure. And I'll kind of skip ahead when we talk a little bit about treatment and how you might start to think about this, again, because I'm reflecting on the quietness in the room and how some of these things sound pretty negative. But to have open dialogue with your family and for some of your family and supports to be in the room tonight to understand that this is normal, common, and less uncertain but predictable, that there are going to be these role shifts, is the first step to being proactive about making sure that these role shifts are, the negative impacts are as minimized as possible. Okay? So understanding this can help you begin down the path of trying to make those shifts as smooth as possible. No doubt, an under-researched area but getting increasing attention across all neurological conditions is caregiver stress and burnout. Back to that anger and the sense of burden that I heard folks mention already. Your loved ones who are caring for you, or you caring for a loved one, can become very tired to the point that you develop a depression on your own. It's not uncommon. And so we have to be cognizant of that fact, and we have to be sensitive to the loved ones who are caring for us. And there you go, 50% of individuals with MS are dependent, in some way dependent on help from a close relative. I love this slide because, again, as we shift into talking about what do we do about this, where do we go, if you look at this picture, on the left, it's kind of hard to see, but on the left there's a boy in a red shirt, and he looks like he's in a department store playing a video game, right? And let's call it his brother. He's sitting on his brother's back. And it's kind of hard to see here, but if you move to the right half of the slide, the boy now on the floor, serving as a stool, has the red shirt on. You see that? And his brother is now getting a turn to play the video game. There were no stools in the area, so someone's got to give their back to help. Okay? And we assume they're brothers, so they're functioning as a team. Think of this as your family unit. All right? Oh, yeah. The thing I like about this is, guess what? Let's assume the boy in the red shirt has MS. Guess what? He can get down on his back and help support his family in unique ways too. And I'm going to ask for one more participation moment. Can you think of any way, if you are diagnosed with MS, that you can actually bend over backwards or forwards in this case to help with the role shifts in your family? Say it a little bit. Yeah, I will. Oh, that's excellent. And I'll repeat it. Thank you. If you didn't hear that, your children, or if you have MS, your children can learn a deepened sense of responsibility. Yeah. That's a reframe on the burden thing, right? It's not that they're burdened, but they have to learn how to do some other things, and that's not a bad thing. So just by being you and having your condition, you can help facilitate that if you do it in, a positive way. Anything else? Empathy?
I still nurture my children and my grandchildren.
Yeah.
They're also getting empathy for dealing with me.
Yeah, and exactly. And more generally, even a conversation or you being open about how you feel and your condition can relieve in your family members and a lot of loved ones a lot of their own stress. Even when you're not doing okay, sharing that openly is much better for them than if you're closed off about it and don't want to talk about it. Then they're back in that uncertainty in the dark. They have no clue how you feel, and that might bring them angst. Yeah. So I guess we're taping this, so I have to repeat some of the things so we can hear, but we're talking about empathy in the audience and how that may be a positive thing to bring to the family. Excellent. We talked about emotions related to loss. Just quickly here, those emotions related to loss occur within the family, not just within the individual, okay? Because a husband or a wife or someone else can also feel like they're losing who you used to be. They can feel that way. So having empathy for that is also important. Okay, let's hone in on this. Children of individuals with MS may have fears, and a common emotion that we don't talk enough about is they may also feel embarrassed. Sorry to say, but let's be honest here so we can try to help ourselves. How many of you have felt like a loved one, either a child or another person, has felt embarrassed by you? Gosh, that's an awful feeling, isn't it? Okay. Open communication. I'm going to get ahead of the question I usually get. How do we talk to our kids about this? Open communication is crucial. There is no scenario that you could give me that I would come back at you and say, yes, close yourself off, don't talk to your kids. There are ways to go about it that are more effective than others. There is timing of having certain conversations with your kids that may be more or less effective, but nothing other than openness is going to be helpful. All right? And we can talk offline through questions or after if you have specific questions about this comment about open communication. What is the best way to tell my children about MS? Explain in a non-emotional, age-appropriate way. Boy, that's generic, right? What the heck does that mean? If I knew, I wouldn't have to ask this question. Well, first of all, non-emotional. I don't mean you should be cold, or anything like that. But to start having a conversation in the throes of a depressive moment, or if you just got a diagnosis and you're upset, or you just got a relapse and you're upset, to use that as an opportunity to have a conversation with your children might place on them more negative emotions than they need to have in that moment. So that's all I mean by non-emotional, not unemotional, but wait until you pick the time when you're ready and you're not in a negative emotional state. Age appropriate, I've read a bunch of books from folks with MS that talk about their different ways. What I mean simply here is you can use metaphors for younger kids, Mommy hurts sometimes, Daddy hurts and needs a Band-Aid sometimes, and I have to go to Dr. Gold to get my Band-Aid once in a while. That's all I mean, okay? Age-appropriate ways that they can really kind of internalize. Children are more resilient than we believe, and there was a woman over here that responded, I think that opened up the conversation about kids, and how you could support them by teaching them more responsibility. That's a great point, because what we find out when we study children of many conditions, divorce, certain chronic illnesses, is that these kids are more resilient than we will ever think. There are loved ones, there are kids, so we never want to burden them with information that we think is going to make them, put them in a negative place. But when we study them, they have opportunities to develop strengths, to develop resilience, and they do. And there you go. I'm not going to reiterate it, but as you were speaking to here, this can really help kids learn certain lessons about what we value in life. Okay? Give them a concrete opportunity to show you that they can learn to be responsible, helpful, empathetic individuals just simply through your condition. So I've got about 10 more minutes. I want to zoom into maybe one or two other areas of life. I get this question a lot. Some friendships may not last through your diagnosis of MS. Do you tell your friends? Are you too embarrassed? Do you incorporate them into your MS life? Reality is some friendships aren't strong enough to last. And that's okay, because the ones that do last much longer and are stronger. In terms of talking to your friends or family, really, about disclosing your diagnosis, or if they already know about disclosing relapses or other parts of your illness, it's not a yes or no question. Do I tell? We'll talk about work in a minute. Do I tell my employer? It's more about the timing and the balancing of what information you want to share when, and again, how to do it, right? Not yes or no, but how we go about doing it. Those are some considerations to think about. You know, how well does the person that you want to share this information with understand MS? Are you going to say, I have MS, and walk away and have them have a misconstrued understanding that within a week you're going to die, right? So we have to consider what they already know about MS and help to educate them as we talk to them. Try not to be too proud to accept help from friends or loved ones. That's important. You're not a burden by accepting help. Intimacy. Okay, Stuart mentioned intimacy and how we might make you uncomfortable and talk about intimacy issues. I'm not going to do that. In the interest of time, I'll bring up the point and we can talk about questions later if you have to. But the psychosocial impacts on intimacy are strong. Dr. Gold, if anyone has follow-up questions, is still in the room. He can answer some of the physiological aspects of intimacy. We talk about bladder functioning and how that might impact intimacy and sexual activity. But intimacy is impacted psychologically by stress, believe it or not, change in roles. When human beings get extremely stressed for a long time, guess what they don't feel like doing often? Being intimate. It really can impact your mood, and it can impact your physiological functioning regarding sex and intimacy. Symptoms of sexual dysfunction estimated to occur in about 65, I've read up to 75% of individuals with MS. Okay, and I mentioned briefly here, bladder function seems to be one of the biggest variables there. The extent to which there's bladder dysfunction, we find, is correlated highly with overall sexual dysfunction. And I mentioned this already, only a portion of those sexual symptoms that you might experience are really due to the physiology. There's another proportion that are due to indirect consequences such as mood effects and chronic stress. Obviously even fatigue. To work or not to work, that is the question, right? Someone mentioned this just a few minutes ago as a question, about how some of these medications can help them function in the work world. What percentage of people with MS are employed? Anybody want to venture a guess? I heard 60, 75, 80, excuse me. Yeah, 75% are employed at the time of diagnosis, okay? And we know by the time we're at diagnosis with the course of MS is extremely variable, as you know, but at the time of diagnosis, you're probably symptomatic, or else you wouldn't be before a doctor trying to get a diagnosis. And you may very well be symptomatic for many years trying to figure this thing out. So that's the importance of that statistic, is that most people are still working and able to work. 35 to 40% remain in the workforce throughout the course of their diagnosis. And I think, I'm thinking back to the literature that I pulled that statistic from, I think this is midway through a typical course of MS. And by course, I don't mean a relapse episode, but just your lifespan with the condition. That's high. I think that's high. I was surprised. I was thinking that it would be lower. Oops, we got a bullet point that didn't come up. Should I disclose my diagnosis to my employer? We don't have legal representation at this talk, so I'm going to hold off on a lot of the tangents that can come from this question. But in general, it really depends. It is not necessary, technically, that you disclose your diagnosis, but is that healthy? The literature on this topic says, in most cases, it's not. Eventually, it's probably useful to disclose to make your work life more accommodating to you. But you should know employers are not permitted to ask about medical history unless there are specific physical demands that are part of the job description. If you're going to have to be lifting as part of the job description, then they're allowed to ask, how strong are you? If you're required to stand or move about, they're allowed to ask certain things about your physical condition or your medical history. Otherwise, they're not permitted to ask. As I mentioned, issues can arise down the line when you don't disclose, okay? And then you're working and you get to a point to where maybe you can't work as well or as much, and you've been deceptive for a year or 2 years. Sometimes that can cause more problems in the workplace. So like every other answer that I've mentioned so far, this is a balance. This is a decision that you have to make with your loved ones and your doctors in consideration of your current functioning. So what can be done? This is not an exhaustive list, obviously, of what can be done, but I can't emphasize enough how openness about your thoughts and feelings, especially with those that are in your inner circle, your family that you love, can be a huge relief for not only you, but the ones around you, and then you, because they're functioning more smoothly. Focus on what you can do as opposed to what you can't. Dr. Gold mentioned this already. Okay? We have to be realists, and the room was quiet for the first half of my talk because I was talking about statistics and phenomena with MS that are real, that in some cases are unfortunate and difficult. But we can choose to focus on those things or focus on workarounds and problem solving to those issues. Engage in healthy lifestyle behaviors, to reiterate some of the points again that Dr. Gold made. Not only does the research, or is it beginning to show, I think you mentioned Alzheimer's, but with MS, that some behavioral interventions or strategies can be helpful in the condition. Even if the research said that the direct effects of exercise and healthy diet, the Mediterranean diet, don't affect MS medically, I would still encourage you to do them because the indirect effects that healthy lifestyle behaviors provide for your overall mood and sense of well-being will only increase your overall sense of well-being in the context of MS. So it's important indirectly as much as it might be directly. And you've had a chance to look at these bullet points. Exercise and underscore, social connectedness is huge. It's huge, and this bears out in the literature across neurologic condition and even emotional conditions. So let me say one more thing about this. I have just about 1 minute left. Social connectedness has a lot of cognitive benefits. It's not straightforward that you should have friends because friends make you feel good and that's good. The more you interact with human beings, the more you speak with them, the more you're engaging your language systems in the brain, and you're exercising your brain by doing that. You're giving your brain a workout. You're pulling forth connections between words that you use in conversation and what those words mean. And by exercising that channel, you're strengthening your brain. So the social environment is actually cognitively stimulating and supportive at the same time. That's why that's so huge. Take care of your caregivers. Try to avoid burnout and seek professional help. If there's one overarching recommendation I can give today, and I'm not here to solicit patients, but it's to find a therapist or a social worker who functions as a therapist, a psychologist even, if you feel like you could benefit or your family could benefit from that. Going to a psychologist or a therapist is not only for individuals who feel like they have dysfunction. It can be for individuals and families who feel like they're doing okay and they just want to learn strategies to strengthen that okayness. Okay? So I encourage you to do that even if you feel good. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. Remember, a diagnosis of MS is not an individual sentence to misery, but rather a family challenge. Rise up together. Okay? Take one hand of the strap and let those who love you take the other hand. And I'll leave you with just a reminder of that image of teamwork. And then here's a resource I throw up because of all the books I've read on this coming from an individual about families, this seems to be pretty helpful from what others tell me and what I found. So take a look at that. And of course, MS Views and News as a final plug here. Tons of articles constantly updated on all aspects of MS, including the ones that I highlighted tonight about the impacts on your family, your work life, and you as an individual. Okay, so that's it for me, and I want to take just maybe 15 minutes or so for questions.
First, we want to say thank you. By the way, I did not pay him to give that plug about MS Views and News, all right? So now, Michelle again is on that side, and I'm on that side, all right? And these questions for this segment specifically are not just for the patients. So if you're a caregiver and you want to say anything about, like, how do you get more time or something to do with what he just spoke about, we would like you to ask these questions. You know, your own levels, what you feel about, you know, your relationship with the person that is living with MS. These are the types of questions that you could bring up. And now's the time to do it. Why? Because he's here to give the answers, okay? So please ask. Can I go back a slide? You know what? I'm going to tell you something. It's going to be on our channel in a week. All right?
So no, that's the answer. Can't go back.
All right. Anybody back here? Anybody over there? Any questions? You got one? I know Carlene's got one. I don't see any questions coming up.
No questions?
Oh, wait, we have one over here. We're going to get somebody to break the ice.
Yeah.
What do you do once your caregiver primarily becomes a teenager?
I'll repeat the question. What do you do when your caregiver, your primary caregiver, becomes a teenager? You mean obviously moves from childhood
was your husband to now it's your daughter? Or
I mean, your husband became your daughter?
No, became ex-husband, and now you have primary custody of your daughter, and naturally you want her to live a normal teenage life, and now she all of a sudden is dealing with it, and she wants to keep it inside naturally.
Yes. Okay. So that's a more specific question. So I think the global question is when you have a primary caregiver and something in your life happens that role shifts, and now another person takes on the role, and specifically a teenager takes on the role of being your primary caregiver. That's the question. And they want to be a teenager. And you want them to be too. And the important part of your question is that they're keeping it all inside. See, I don't make a lot of money because the answers are simple. They're complex to implement, change, but they're simple answers. And the first place you can start is having open communication with whomever your caregiver is, teenager or not, especially a teenager, because teenagers, as we know, tend to bottle up a lot of emotions when there's MS or no MS. That's just what they do.
Yeah, they keep them bottled up. That's a teenager.
So an open dialogue that you can initiate and model for your teenager, how to communicate appropriately about your emotions, is a good place to start. And part of that conversation can be you empathizing with them and how difficult this must be for them because they want to be going out to the movies with friends and doing things that teenagers do, and sometimes you're asking for their help. Is a great starting place, that conversation. If it's too difficult to have, kind of like it was really quiet before the questions because it's a difficult thing to bring up, do it in the context of professional help.
But what if, sorry,
Yep.
what
Follow up.
if the child then thinks that they're crazy? Because that's something that we've talked about. And she's like, well, to go see a psychologist or a therapist just means you're crazy.
Yeah. And oftentimes, I didn't hear it tonight because you guys have all been, everyone raised their hand, have been to see Dr. Gold. But it's difficult to answer individual questions globally when we start to get into the nuances of what to do. But it's a great question. You know, what do you do if they feel like they're crazy to go see a psychologist? You know, my first answer is what I just said, to come see a psychologist or a therapist of any type when you feel like things are going well can still be useful. So to recruit that person to come into an office with a professional for one visit, the return rate, once they get to have the conversation with the psychologist, increases greatly because they'll shortly realize that this isn't about being crazy. Okay? One point to maybe help you with that is you can maybe see the psychologist first, share that bit of information, and now I'm personalizing and thinking about folks that have come into me, and it's more beneficial when someone comes into me first and says, look, my kid is struggling with this, can you help? When the kid's not in the room first. Then we talk about a strategy to get the kid in and what we're going to share and how we're going to share it, and it usually is more effective than showing up with the kid first visit when they don't want to be there, and then we have a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What do you do for the caregivers that feel that they feel bad about leaving the patient? Okay, that they just feel that they don't want their loved one who has MS to feel like that person just wants to get out of the house. They want to, they don't want the negative impact of getting out of the house. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but
So
somebody recently asked me, this is a caregiver, and he feels bad about leaving his wife who has MS. He feels terrible about leaving her in the house because he's afraid that she's going to only think that he wants to get away from her. Now what do you say?
Yeah, that she's going to think that she's more of a burden
Right.
by his going out because it's going to emphasize to her that, oh, I'm such a burden that he needs to run.
Correct.
At the first chance he can get. And some of the same response in terms of we really need to get into an open dialogue that's very difficult to have sometimes one-on-one without professional facilitation. Okay? But the bottom line with caregiver dynamics is that caregivers cannot be good caregivers if they're not good caregivers to themselves first. Period. Just like parents can't be good parents if they're not healthy themselves first. You run ragged chasing your kid around, and you may finally square them up to have a conversation, but you're so tired and exhausted that conversation is not going to go well. You've got to take care of yourself first. So what I'd say to that is, first of all, caregivers have to understand that their self-care is important not only for them, but they won't be able to care for their loved one effectively if they're not healthy. So they need to get out. And then to answer the question about, well, how does that make the person with MS feel? Will they feel abandoned or like they were more of a burden that the person had to run? Probably should be a conversation with a professional. If the dynamics are such that they're feeling that way and an open dialogue between caregiver and person with MS doesn't remedy that, then probably we need to do it in the context. And the other thing I'll say about that, Stuart, is support groups or group therapy. Something that I've done before and I'm about to embark on again with people with chronic illness. Support groups or group therapy can be extremely important for you to recognize what other people in your same condition are dealing with and how they deal with it. There's a global professional answer that we need to talk about it, but every individual has a unique way of dealing with that same challenge of guilt and burden in loved ones. And to share that with one another, and for the caregivers to get in a supportive environment with other caregivers can also be extremely helpful.
So then there was, I'll come over to you in a moment. Then there was another one that, similar to what you were talking about with children, there's another woman that I know that has MS who has teenage daughters who do not want to leave their mother's side at all. They have all their friends over to the house all the time. They insisted to their mother before they were teens that they be homeschooled, and they just do not leave her. And at this point in time, she's the one that wants the freedom.
So, yeah, and so it's the reverse scenario, right?
Right.
It's almost the complete reverse scenario. And I'm going to be direct. I've been fairly direct all night. The bottom line is they need to get out. This isn't a matter of, well, what's your opinion or what's your philosophy? I'm speaking from research that caregivers and children of people with chronic illness will not be healthy if they feel like they have to, especially teenagers, if they have to be by that person's side 24/7 and don't get out and get the social needs that they have met. So they need to get out. How are they going to get out? Again, if it hasn't been effective to this point in your communication with them that they need to get out, then bring it in the context of professional help. And the dialogue that they can have in therapy can help get them out and where they need to be. But absolutely, they don't need to be by your side 24/7.
Right.
We have a 4-year-old son. He is the sweetest little boy as long as I'm laying in bed. As soon as he helps me and he transfers me into my wheelchair, he is the meanest little boy to me.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because I'm in my wheelchair, because of the MS? He's never known me to walk. I mean, I stopped walking after he turned a year old.
Yeah. And you said you have a 4-year-old?
Mm-hmm. He's
Yeah.
4.
Wow, wow. And again, I don't want to get too individual case basis in the open setting here, but I'm going to answer one part of your question. No, I don't think he's mean because you have MS.
Do you think it's just because I can't exactly get on the floor like a normal mom. Like, he goes over to Grandma's house. Grandma can get on the floor with him and play with him and do all those fun things with him where I can't. I have to do other things with him where Grandma can't. Grandma can do the stuff that I was able to do with his older sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And
are...
I feel guilty over it.
Sure.
I feel bad because I can't get into the car and drive to the park and take him to the park and bake the cupcakes with him like his 17-year-old sister can do with him. I can't do all those stuff like I did with her when she was little.
So it's not surprising to me then that you would hold yourself to blame because of your condition for the different emotions that he expresses. That's not surprising to me because we have a vulnerability to those emotions that I said, a sense of loss, guilt, okay, sense of burden to other people. But you have to understand, guys, it's not, it's normal to have those emotions, but to draw logical conclusions that it is your MS that's making him angry is probably inaccurate. Not to say that your situation doesn't affect his life in some way, but if we want to skip ahead to solutions, again, probably bringing him somewhere professionally to look at all the variables that are in your life that may be causing this is probably moving closer to a solution than, for me to give you a single recommendation here. It's a bigger dynamic. It's not just your MS because your son is 4. I'm not sure, and I don't know your situation again, but I'm not sure he understands your MS at 4. I don't know how a 4-year-old could. So I don't think it's that you have MS that he's angry.
It's probably me.
Probably you said? Probably maybe your own vulnerability to feeling like a burden that makes you think that a lot of things in your life are your fault.
Probably.
Yeah. So that's something that maybe you could explore more professionally, and it might help. Because we're vulnerable to that. We all are.
Okay, next question I'm going to give you again.
Okay.
Another scenario, okay? one of the married couple, one has MS, obviously, that's the topic here, right? And the other one doesn't. And the one with MS wants to go out all the time. But the one without says no, because I don't want to have to leave early from somewhere, because then you get fatigued. You get me all excited and pumped up about getting out of the house and going to do something, and then in 40 minutes from now, you feel like crap and you want to go home, and I still want to stay out, and then I can't. So now what?
Yeah. So again, these are all individual scenarios that I would love to meet with these folks one-on-one to work out plans. But we talk about pacing. You know, there are plans, there are behavioral action plans that we can put into place to remedy both ends of that conundrum, Stuart, both the person who wants to stay out more that doesn't have MS and the person that maybe is going home early. There are specific plans we can put in place to pace so that maybe the person with MS can stay out an extra hour. Maybe not till midnight, like, you know, their friends might want to, but maybe we can get them an extra hour. And then maybe we can ask the loved one who wants to stay out till midnight to compromise a little bit and accept 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock and kind of meet in the middle. But I don't know, in all honesty, I can give you a great answer that's going to address that until and unless I get two people in a dialogue in a setting to figure out, you know, where folks are willing to give a little bit. So I guess maybe the answer would be we need to find a compromise.
Any other questions? You want me to give another one? Okay, look at that. Here we go. That one first.
I need to know, I haven't been around a lot of 6-year-olds, so as far as age appropriate, I don't know how to explain to my 6-year-old granddaughter what my MS is.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you're looking for an example of how to explain to a 6-year-old what MS is. 6-year-olds are beginning to expand their language, okay? And they're not anywhere near full capacity of language and the concepts that are associated with that. So you need to choose the language that you know your grandson? Granddaughter, I'm sorry. That your granddaughter knows for concepts that apply to you. I'm being real abstract here, but if you want to explain that grandma gets tired and that's why we can't go down to the lake and feed the ducks a second time today, you know, then if your granddaughter knows the language of what it means to be tired, then you can use that language, right?
Oh, yeah, because she would watch, I'd tell her, let's go, you can watch me take a nap. Mm-hmm. If she'd tell me she didn't want to take a nap.
Yeah.
I said, well, come watch me take a nap.
Yeah. And so do we need to tell a 6-year-old or even a 7-year-old or maybe even a 9-year-old that we have MS? Yeah, but do we need to use MS as a term at 6-year-old? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know that a 6-year-old's going to understand what that is.
Well, that's why I didn't know if somebody had, from their own experiences, if they had some way to explain it. Because it's hard to explain it to an adult, let alone to try and explain it to a child.
Yeah. Oh, someone has an answer for you, so I'll step aside.
Okay, I teach kids, and so they're like from kindergarten up, and what I always tell them is that it's like, your brain gives you all kinds of signals, and sometimes you can't feel certain parts of the body, or sometimes you're tired, or sometimes this happens, but don't be scared of it. It's just, my messages don't always go to certain parts of my body, and they get it, and I'm like, does anybody have any questions? And they're like, no. And that's how it is, and I always really open, and so that's how I do it. If that helps you, I hope.
Grandma has a special condition that ... makes me tired from time to time, makes me, use this cane, makes me do these different things. Yeah.
Question over here.
My husband has been very supportive, but he has lived away for 12 years, and he only comes home once every 4 months for about maybe 7 days, sometimes 10. But we talk every day, but whenever I guess he senses that I'm not feeling good, he'll say, oh, you must be under stress again. And what's wrong? What's stressing you out? Well, I'm not feeling stressed, but how do I get it across to him that it's not stress. I just don't feel good. That I'm
Good
extra
question.
tired or I'm just nauseated. I mean,
Great question. People have funny ways of handling difficult things. And so I don't know that your efforts to try to help, you said your husband, understand might ever get through by just continually reiterating, it's not that I'm stressed, it's because of this, because of that. Because it sounds to me like your husband's way of dealing with this difficult condition that you struggle with is to maybe deny it a little bit. I mean, I'm sure he's acknowledged that you have MS, but I say deny it a little bit. We talked about denial, okay? Because it's too difficult for him to handle. So if he, or this applies to a lot of scenarios, can appropriate the symptoms that you have to some other thing, oh, it must be your mood, not MS, it's just you're stressed, it must be your work, it must be this, it makes it easier for him, right? It makes it easier for him because he doesn't have to deal with the more difficult topic to say it's because of this. So to square up, so to speak, and have a conversation about, no, I don't have stresses in my life. You probably do, but to say, no, I don't in this situation, and I don't have this, and I don't have that, but here's what I do have, and here's how it makes me feel, is probably the best you can do. And then at some point, if that's still not accepted, then there may be nothing that you can say until he's ready to deal with how difficult this is.
Well, I think part of it is that he knows that I had two really good friends that, we did everything together, and then they suddenly couldn't understand why I was too tired to go do things. And so now they've kind of pulled away. They don't call me anymore. They don't, So, and my husband knows that I've been upset about it, but I've just said, well, okay, they just can't accept, and because I'm not able to do everything with them that I did previously, so my husband knows that I've been kind of upset about that, but I'm trying to just press on and say, well, then obviously they weren't the friends I thought they were.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all you can do. You can't force other people to feel the way you feel and understand it completely, especially if they're showing signs that they're not willing or ready to do that.
You want to speak to him afterwards? Okay, anybody else? Then we're going to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Justin Koenitzer.